the shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and the things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
From the shadows just beyond the tree line to the things waiting in the dark, this is the Shadow Frequency. I'm Matt Wilson.
And I'm Juniper Ravenwood. Once again, opening the file cabinet, which continues to feel less like furniture and more like a bad idea. All right, let's see what nightmare fuel we've got tonight.
That drawer has never once let us down in the worst possible way.
Here we go. A tiny music box that only plays when the studio lights flicker.
No.
Oh, it gets worse. It's not even playing a full song, just a few notes over and over.
Put that back before the lights decide to help it out.
Happily. Let's see. And now we've got a single roller skate with something dry dark inside the wheel.
That is somehow even less okay.
Right, because one roller skate means somebody made it exactly halfway out of a terrible situation.
Or didn't.
See, that's why I hate this cabinet. Wait, here it is. Tonight's folder. Here you go, Matt.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, episode 301, Melon Heads of Kirtland, Ohio.
Deep in the woods near Kirtland, people have whispered for years about small, pale figures with oversized heads, watching from the trees, hiding near back roads, and waiting just out of sight.
A legend tied to ruined places, cruel experiments, and something feral still moving through the darkness.
Tonight, we head into one of Ohio's strangest and most unsettling local legends, where folklore, fear, and the deep woods all start to blur together.
This is episode 301, Melon Heads of Kirtland, Ohio.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson, produced by Juniper Ravenwood, with Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Tonight, we're heading to a stretch of road in northeast Ohio where the trees crowd in close, the dark seems to swallow the shoulder, and locals have spent generations daring each other to slow down just long enough to look into the woods. They say if you do, you might see something pale and wrong standing just beyond the tree line. Small bodies, huge misshapen heads, still as stumps until they're not. Around Kirtland and nearby Chardon, that legend has a name, the Melon Heads. Most versions point to Wisner Road and to one shadowy figure at the center of it all, a doctor called Crow.
And that right there is exactly the kind of story I love, because it's got all the ingredients. A real road, dark woods, a name people remember, and just enough disagreement in the details to make you wonder whether the truth got buried under the legend.
Right.
Or whether the legend grew up around something that really did happen.
That's what makes this one tick. Some people tell it like a ghost story. Some tell it like the backwoods body horror. And some insist there may have been a real property, a real doctor, and a real fire underneath all of it. So tonight, Matt, I think we open the file on one of Ohio's nastiest little pieces of folklore.
Well, first off, Juniper, thank you for digging into the file cabinet and pulling out a case that feels like it was designed in a lab specifically to make people uneasy. Because the Melon Heads legend has this incredible way of feeling local and unreal at the same time. It doesn't start in some vague, haunted nowhere. It starts on an actual road people know, a road people have driven for years, a road that has become such a rite of passage that folks in Northeast Ohio have been going out there for decades just to see whether the woods gives anything back. Cleveland Magazine described Wisner Road as one of those places that changes when the sun goes down, ordinary enough by day, but under moonlight, suddenly transformed into Melon Head country. And that is such a perfect phrase because it tells you this is not just a story people heard, this is a story people went looking for. So let's walk into the classic version the way locals have passed it around for years. The story says there was once a man known as Dr. Crow, C-R-O-W, sometimes C-R-O-W-E, sometimes another spelling entirely, who kept a group of children hidden away in the woods near Wisner Road. In some tellings, those children were orphans. In others, they were children suffering from hydrocephalus, a condition associated with abnormal fluid buildup around the brain. And depending on who is telling the tale, Dr. Crow is either a strange but tragic caretaker trying to help them, or something much darker. In the darker version, he isn't treating those children at all. He's experimenting on them. He's injecting them, altering them, making their heads larger and more bulbous until they become something warped, isolated, and no longer fully part of the ordinary human world. That's where the legend gets under your skin, because the Melon Heads are not usually framed like ghosts in white gowns floating around a cemetery. They're described as living beings, feral things, survivors of some hidden human disaster. Little figures with pale skin, oversized heads, malformed bodies, and an eerie way of watching from the woods. They're close enough to human to feel tragic, but wrong enough to feel dangerous. That combination is nasty. It's body horror mixed with folklore, and it plays on one of the oldest fears there is, the fear of something almost human standing just outside the firelight, staring back. And then comes the part every urban legend needs, the break, the violence, the moment where the hidden evil can no longer stay hidden. In the most widely repeated version, the children eventually turn on Dr. Crow, maybe because of what he did to them. Maybe because they were driven beyond the edge of reason. However the story is told, it ends with fire. Dr. Crow dies, the home or institution burns, and the children flee into the surrounding woods where they remain, lurking, breeding, surviving, watching anyone foolish enough to come down their road after dark. Some versions say they simply stare. Some say they attack. Some say they steal food, pets, even babies. Folklore always does that, doesn't it? It starts with one image strong enough to live in your head, and then every new teller adds one more cruel detail. What really gives this story teeth is the geography. Wisner Road isn't just a name attached afterward, it's part of the engine of the legend. Local coverage has tied the story not just to that winding wooded stretch, but to the nearby backroads, the old bridge area, and the larger zone of places where kids dared each other to stop the car, kill the headlights, and listen. There's even reporting that folds in a nearby Crybaby Bridge, which only adds another layer of unease. Once a place gets enough stories attached to it, the land itself starts doing half the work. A bridge becomes more than a bridge. A dead-end road becomes a threshold. A patch of woods becomes territory. And I can absolutely imagine how this would spread. One teenager hears it from an older cousin. A group of friends goes out there at night. Somebody sees movement in the brush. Somebody else hears a sound they can't place. Another person swears something crossed the road in front of the headlights. Suddenly the place is no longer just a place. It's a test, a dare, a legend you participate in. And once people start making pilgrimages to a story, that story gets roots. News coverage as recent as 2024 and 2025 still describes locals and filmmakers talking about how big the Melon Heads legend remained in Kirtland and Chardon, which tells you this thing didn't die with campfire stories. It crossed into movies, streaming, and local identity. That to me is one of the creepiest parts. Whether anyone ever truly saw anything on Wisner Road almost becomes secondary. The road has been haunted by expectation for years. People go out there already primed, Every branch snap means more. Every odd silhouette becomes a possibility. Every patch of fog feels loaded. And once a legend reaches that point, you don't need to prove it in a laboratory. You just need one dark road, one willing imagination, and one moment where the woods seem to be looking back at you. And that's the thing. Some stories feel invented, but this one feels inhabited.
Yeah, and it has that ugly little edge to it. Not elegant, not gothic, just mean and wrong.
When we come back, we'll go deeper into the search for whatever might be real underneath the Melon Heads legend, and why the name Dr. Crow may be both part of the myth and part of the mystery.
So far tonight, we've got a dead-end road, a doctor with a shifting identity, children hidden away in the woods, and a legend that somehow got more vivid the more people passed it around. And I've got to wonder what our listeners are thinking right now. Are you hearing pure folklore? Or are you hearing the kind of story that maybe started with one real place and one real name and then grew teeth in the dark? I've got a feeling the second half is going to give you a lot to chew on, because this is one of those cases where the paper trail does not kill the creepiness. It might actually make it worse. And with that, I'll hand it over to Chris.
Hey there, Juniper. Real quick. If this show keeps you up at night in the best way possible, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Seriously, it helps us more than anything. Catch the Shadow Frequency on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Rumble, and every major podcast platform. And for the full experience, head to shadowfrequencypodcast.com. Episodes, blog deep dives, merch, and a spot to leave us a voicemail straight from the site. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. Handing it back to you, Juniper.
Time to fire up the spectral cosmic message materializer, flipping the switches. Let's give the dials a twitch, let static settle, and see what strange scrap of correspondence comes drifting out of the other side.
Message retrieved.
Oh, there it is, fluttering through the ether like a note caught in the Homet radio waves. Let's unphone it and see what our listener had to say. This is, hey guys, this is Trina from New Mexico. I listen on Spotify, and I just wanted to say how much I enjoy the Shadow Frequency. It makes for great late night listening and honestly sure beats watching TV. Keep up the great work. I've really been enjoying the show. Trina from New Mexico. Now that's a great note right there. Trina, first off, thank you very much for listening, and I have to say I love the phrase sure beats watching TV, because honestly, that may be one of the best compliments a paranormal podcast can get. If we can be the thing people put on late at night when the house is quiet and the lights are low, that feels exactly right for this show. And if the rest of you want to send us a note from your corner of the map, we'd love to hear from you too. Email is shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. Tell us where you listen, how you found the show, what episode creeped you out the most, or what strange case you think we ought to crack open next. All right, Matt, back to the woods.
You are tuned to the Shadow Frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper and Trina. Thank you for that. Late night listening is absolutely where a story like this belongs. Now, if the first half of this case is all shadow and folklore, the second half is where you start asking the dangerous question, what exactly is underneath it? Because one of the most interesting things about the Melon Heads legend is that the deeper people looked, the less simple the answer became. One hand, local genealogical research strongly undercut the standard campfire version. Bonnie Snyder of the Lake County Genealogical Society went looking for Dr. Crow in census records, newspaper clippings, obituary indexes, subject files, and cemetery books. And Cleveland Magazine reported that she found no evidence of a folkloric Dr. Crow matching the usual story. Her conclusion was basically maybe he slipped through the cracks, but she was highly doubtful. That matters because it tells us the version with the secret orphanage, medical horrors, and the neat little villain name may not rest on the kind of paper trail you'd expect. if that exact story were true. But here's where it gets good, because the story does not end there. The Geauga County Maple Leaf later reported a very different wrinkle. According to interviews with a family descendant, a man named Etienne Pascal Crow was real. He was considered a doctor of some sort. He did own a cabin on Wisner Road in Chardon Township, and that cabin did eventually burn down. The descendant also said there had once been a stone at the end of the drive with the name CROWE carved into it, which means generations of curious kids and trespassers may have had a real name and a real property to attach all their fears to. And once that happens, folklore doesn't just grow, it anchors. That may be the single most important clue in the whole case, because if there really was a Dr. Crow, and there really was a spooky property on Wisner Road, and that property really did burn, then you suddenly have the perfect skeleton for a legend. You do not need an orphanage to be real. You do not need experiments to be real. You just need enough reality to give the story a spine. Then the rest gets built by nervous teenagers, local rumor, and the human instinct to fill dark spaces with something worse than uncertainty. And that's my skepticism beat tonight, because I think it's the fairest one. The most rational explanation may be that the monstrous part of the Melon Heads story is folklore layered onto real location and real surname. A creepy cabin, a carved stone, kids partying where they shouldn't, a later fire, maybe some old rock piles, odd terrain, and a nearby bridge spooky enough to collect stories of its own. Once all that starts blending together, memory does the rest. You don't even need a deliberate lie. You just need repetition. You need one kid to say, "That was Dr. Crow's place." Another to add, "He kept children there." Another to say, "No, he experimented on them." And eventually the tale arrives fully formed, ugly as sin, and nobody can point to the exact moment it crossed from rumor into legend. But, and this is the part I love, that explanation does not drain the power out of this story. Not at all. In some ways, it makes it stronger, because now the Melon Heads legend stops being just a monster story and becomes a story about how places absorb fear, how roads get reputations, how a name carved into stone can outlive the man it belonged to and come back wearing a new face. And once enough people drive a stretch of road expecting to see something, the experience becomes participatory. They become part of the legend's life cycle. That's why Wisner Road kept pulling people back. Local coverage has described generations of people going out there to hunt for the story, and even modern filmmakers have talked about how deeply the legend stayed embedded in the region. It became folklore by being performed over and over again. The Maple Leaf coverage even included a descendant remembering the property as eerie in its own right, an isolated cabin with no running water or electricity, a ravine, a gateway, a bridge nearby, and all the strange little details that children remember intensely. And that's important too. Real places do not have to be supernatural to become haunted in memory. Sometimes they just have to feel off, empty, in the wrong way, too still, too cut off from everything else. A place like that can collect stories the way an old coat collects burrs. And then there's the final twist. Whether the Melon Heads were ever real in the flesh almost doesn't matter now. The legend survived. It crossed decades. It moved from widespread dares to magazine features to TV news to film releases. That is its own kind of survival. The monsters may not roam the woods in the biological sense, but they absolutely roam the cultural landscape of Northeast Ohio. They live in the warning someone gives you before you turn on to Wisner Road. They live in the silence after a car door shuts at night. They live in that sudden childish certainty that you should not stay parked here 1 second longer than necessary. So maybe that's the best way to leave this one. Not with a hard debunking and not with a declaration that the woods are full of swollen-headed creatures waiting to rush your headlights. Maybe the truth is stranger and more durable than either of those. Maybe there was a real name, a real property, a real burned cabin, and a real road that felt wrong after dark. And maybe that was more than enough, because sometimes all folklore needs is one splinter of reality and a forest willing to keep the rest. And if you ever find yourself on Wisner Road at night, maybe don't stare too long into the tree line. Some stories survive because people keep looking for movement.
Yeah, and once a place gets that reputation, every shape in the dark starts auditioning for the role.
Exactly. And the Melon Heads may be one of the best examples of that. A legend that may never fully prove itself, but never quite let go of the road either. Juniper, take us home.
Tonight, we cracked open the legend of the Melon Heads of Kirtland, Ohio. The winding stretch of Wisner Road, the shifting story of Dr. Crow, the hidden children in the woods, and the uneasy possibility that beneath all that folklore, they may have really been a place, a name, and a fire that helped the whole thing take root. Thanks for hanging out with us for another trip into the strange. And don't forget, you can always reach us at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. Send your stories, your theories, your weird local legends, or just let us know where you listen from. You can also find us on the website at shadowfrequencypodcast.com to keep up with us on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Rumble, and all the podcast directories. We'll be back soon with another strange case from somewhere out there in the dark. Matt, you want to say goodnight?
Thanks for listening, everybody. Stay curious, stay creepy, and we'll catch you next time.
Good night, Shadow Seeker.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and your entertainment.